There are so many misunderstandings about traumatic brain injuries, what causes them, the severity of a brain injury, the symptoms of a brain injury, the permanent effects of a brain injury. A lot of people have an understanding about concussions and other brain injuries from sports, where they're historically downplayed and treated as something you just work through and you're dizzy for a little bit and then you're fine. And that's not really true. And even if it's true in a sport context, having a vehicle drive into you at 30, 40 miles an hour, that's totally different. So oftentimes people, and especially people on the other side of our cases, adjusters, defense attorneys, they're experts, have the idea that if you don't hit your head, you can't have a brain injury or it can't be serious. They also think if you can't see the effects on an MRI, it's not severe. Lots of these ideas that if you can't look at it, it can't be that bad. But the science really doesn't play out in that regard. We know that closed head injuries, even where there's no contact with an outside object, can lead to really severe brain injuries. And the simplest way to understand it is just to think about where your brain is, that it's surrounded by hard bone of your skull, right? And although it's tethered at the bottom by the spinal column, it still floats around in fluid inside this hard shell of your skull. And so what can happen is when you get hit, your brain shuffles around, it hits the inside of your skull. You get hit in with a traditional whiplash kind of injury where you're rear-ended. Head goes forward, snaps back. Well, what happens to your brain on the inside of your skull? It jerks forward, hits the front of your skull, jerks back, maybe hits the backside of your skull. Very common. Now, sure, there are more severe brain injuries. Impact with an outside object can certainly cause a more severe brain injury. Um, Having an open head injury, obviously, worse. So that's not to say that there's not some truth to the idea that if there are visible effects or you can clearly point to a point of contact outside of the body, that those are not necessarily worse, but that doesn't mean that the absence of those factors means there's no brain injury. It's common for people to have a lot of symptoms from a closed head injury where maybe they didn't hit anything at all, or they hit the back of the seat or the front of the seat rest with the back of their head. Any kind of contact is going to make that impact on the inside between the skull and brain more severe. So, in trying to diagnose brain injuries and symptoms and understand what's happening, one of the issues that does make it difficult is understanding the kind of symptoms people can have. And there's really no way of saying, like, well, if you were in a rear end, you're going to have XYZ symptoms, but if you were hit head on, you're going to have ABC. Of all the different kinds of symptoms you can have, there's no particular kind of impact that predicts particular symptoms. And the symptoms of a brain injury can range from pain, just having headaches, to what are called vestibular symptoms, where you have problems with hearing. You can have ringing in your ears. You can have problems with dizziness and vertigo. You can have vision problems. You can have problems with memory, problems processing information, processing words, being able to speak to people, having a loss of coordination, a loss of hand-eye coordination can occur. Um, these kind of symptoms and others frequently occur, and you never see a consistent set of symptoms from person to person. And so it's very important when people express potential symptoms of a brain injury that we help clients advocate for two things. One is to diagnose what exactly is going on with them. We need to know if our clients have a brain injury, and there are other injuries that can replicate the same kind of symptoms. And sometimes you can have both. You can have injuries to the inner ear, which cause some of those hearing and coordination and dizziness problems. You can also have injuries to your eye that can cause problems with vision. You can have, just the fact that you have a whiplash type injury. High neck pain can manifest as headaches. It can cause eye problems. It can cause hearing problems. So we really need to know what exactly is going on with our clients so they can get treatment for what's going on. If it's a problem with the high end of the neck, that's a different kind of treatment path than somebody who has an actual eye injury versus somebody who has a brain injury or somebody who has maybe all three. So we need to know what's going on so that they can get the right kind of treatment. And second, we need to understand if it is a brain injury or part of it is a brain injury, what can be done to help that client. And some brain injury symptoms, you can actually help them. There's treatment that will make it actually better. Some of the treatment that they get is to help cope with the symptoms until the brain can heal. And unfortunately, for some people, where the effects of the brain injury are permanent or very long term, they need help working the brain to create new connections to perform the same tasks down different routes. And so, often with brain injuries, clients, we need them to be vigilant about treating what can be very scary injuries. It's very scary to think about your brain being injured, that having your actual personality or your basic functions all damaged. That's scary. And it's hard for clients to really wrap their head around what has happened and what is happening to them, as much as it is to need to be able to explain that to the people on the other side, the adjusters, the defense attorneys, their experts, to be able to show them this is what occurred. These are the symptoms they have. This is how these symptoms are affecting their lives. And it's easy to shuffle a client to a neurologist who's going to give them medication for headaches, tell them wait it out, or send them to some other provider that claims to be able to treat head injuries but really can't. So you need, if you have a head injury or potentially a head injury, to work with a personal injury attorney who has real experience and expertise in dealing with clients who have head injuries, because that's how you're going to get the kind of advocacy that you need to take care of yourself physically, and then to be able to take care of your case and get the compensation that you deserve.